You saw the thumbnail. 7 ordinary items glowing like gold, empty shelves behind them, hands reaching in from every direction trying to grab what is left. That is not exaggeration. That is exactly what happens when the trucks stop rolling for even 72 hours in this country, and the people who will not panic are the ones who already keep these 7 things in a cool corner of their basement. Here is the truth nobody on the news will tell you. There are 7 items you can still buy this week for less than the price of a single tank of gas, and when the shelves go empty, they will become the most valuable objects in your house. More valuable than the coins in your safe, more valuable than the cash under the mattress, and every one of them sits quietly on Amish pantry shelves in Lancaster County and Holmes County right now, the same way they have sat there since the schism of 1693 when Jacob Ammon led his people out of the Swiss Mennonite Church and taught them to depend on nothing but the land and each other. I am going to walk you through all 7, but the last one, the 7th, is something I only found buried in a 1943 United States Department of Agriculture bulletin that was quietly pulled from most extension libraries by the 1960s. The Amish never stopped using it. Everyone else forgot. If you already own your home, if your house was built before 1980, if you have a basement or a pantry, or even just a hall closet, this applies to you. You do not need to move. You do not need to build anything. You just need to know what to buy before the rest of the country figures it out. The first time I walked into an Amish general store outside Millersburg, Ohio, I stood in front of the shelves for a full 10 minutes because I could not understand what I was looking at. It was not what was there. It was what was not there. There was no aisle of cleaning products, no aisle of vitamins, no aisle of 47 different laundry detergents in bright plastic bottles. There were maybe 200 distinct items in the entire store, and every one of them did 5 jobs. That is the first thing you have to understand about the Amish approach to stockpiling. They do not buy narrow, they buy wide. 1 item, many uses. $1, 10 problems solved. And when the modern supply chain hiccups, which it has done 4 times in the last 6 years, their pantries do not even notice. Let me start with the first item on that shelf, white vinegar, a 1-gallon jug of plain white distilled vinegar. At a Walmart today, it runs about $3.48. At a bulk grocery in Lancaster County, you can get it cheaper, and the Amish family I stayed with in Gordonville kept 12 gallons of it in the cellar at all times. 12. I asked the grandmother why so much, and she looked at me like I had just asked why she kept air in the house. Vinegar preserves food through pickling, which is one of the oldest food storage methods on Earth. It has been used for at least 7,000 years, going back to Babylonian records. When you cannot rely on refrigeration, and the Amish do not rely on refrigeration the way we do, pickling is how you carry the summer garden into February. Cucumbers, beets, cabbage, green beans, watermelon rind, eggs, all of it goes into vinegar and stays edible for months. But that is only the beginning of what a gallon of white vinegar does in a house that stopped trusting corporations decades ago. Vinegar cleans, it disinfects countertops better than most of the sprays you pay $8 for, it cuts grease, it removes hard water stains, it softens laundry, it kills weeds on your driveway. Diluted, it soothes minor sunburns, it descales a coffee pot, it neutralizes odor in a mattress. That single $3 jug replaces roughly $40 worth of specialized products that all sit on their own separate shelves at the supermarket. And each of those specialized products relies on a factory in a state you have never visited and a truck driver who might not show up on Tuesday. Now think about what happens when the shelves go empty. The specialized products vanish first because they have the smallest production runs and the tightest distribution. Vinegar, being a commodity, disappears next, and once it is gone, it is gone. There is no home substitute for vinegar you can whip up in your kitchen. You either have it or you do not. The Amish always have it, 12 gallons at a time, roughly $40 total investment for a family of 10 to last most of a year. That brings me to the second item, and this one is going to sound almost insulting in its simplicity because you already have it in your kitchen right now, but you have 4 ounces of it. The Amish keep 20 pounds baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. A 3-pound bag at Walmart costs about $6. The Amish buy it in 50-pound sacks from the bulk supplier for around $35, which works out to 70 cents a pound, and they use it for everything. It leavens bread, it settles an upset stomach, it brushes teeth, it scours pots, it absorbs odor in the icebox, it softens hard water for laundry, it calms a bee sting, it puts out a small grease fire, which is a thing your grandmother knew and your children have never been told. It even neutralizes the acid in tomato sauce so a pot of chili does not tear up your gut. But here is the piece that matters when the shelves go empty. Baking soda is one of the primary ingredients in every commercial toothpaste, deodorant, antacid, and household cleaner. When the trucks stop, those products vanish in 72 hours, and the raw ingredient that made most of them work, sitting on a shelf in a plain paper bag for pennies, will suddenly be the thing your neighbors are trading canned goods for. I watched an Amish woman in Holmes County use the same open box of baking soda for 4 completely different jobs in a single afternoon. She was not doing it to save money. She was doing it because that is how a competent household runs. And when the modern household loses access to its 40 specialty products, the Amish household loses nothing. Now, here is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because someone benefited from you not knowing this. Someone made sure you grew up thinking you needed a separate product for every problem. And I am going to name them by the end of this video, because the paper trail is real, and the dates are real, and the money is real. But first I need to give you the third and fourth items, because these are the ones that will disappear from every store in the country within 6 hours of a real disruption. Number 3 is honey. Raw, unfiltered, unpasteurized honey, not the plastic bear from the supermarket that has been heat-treated into sugar water. Real honey, the kind the Amish either produce themselves or buy from a neighbor with hives. A pint at an Amish roadside stand runs about $8, a quart runs $15, and it never spoils. Ever. Archaeologists opened sealed clay pots in Egyptian tombs dated to around 1323 before the Common Era, and the honey inside was still edible. 3,000 years old and still good. That is not a marketing claim, that is a fact from the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb. Honey has an extremely low water content and a naturally low pH, which makes it inhospitable to the bacteria and molds that spoil everything else. Store it in a sealed jar in a cool cabinet and it will outlive you, your children, and probably your grandchildren. But that is only the beginning of why the Amish keep gallons of it. Honey is calories. Dense, immediate calories. 1 tablespoon delivers about 64 calories of pure fast energy, which is why long-distance runners have been using it since the ancient Olympic Games. It is medicine. Applied to a minor burn or a small wound, it draws moisture out of bacteria and creates an environment where infection cannot take hold. Hospitals in the United Kingdom returned to medical-grade honey for treating certain resistant wounds around 2004 after antibiotics started failing. The Amish never stopped using it. It is a cough suppressant, more effective than most over-the-counter syrups according to a 2007 study out of Pennsylvania State University. It is a sweetener that does not require refrigeration, refined sugar mining, or corporate infrastructure. When the shelves go empty, refined sugar disappears in a day, corn syrup disappears in 2, every processed food in your grocery store depends on those 2 ingredients, honey does not. A gallon of real honey stored in your basement is roughly 50,000 calories of shelf-stable energy that will still be edible in 2360. That is not a stockpile. That is an inheritance. Number 4 is the one that surprised me the most when I saw how much of it a Holmes County family kept. Salt. Plain, non-iodized salt. Not the little cardboard cylinder with the girl in the yellow dress. 50-pound sacks of pure sodium chloride, the kind you can still buy at any feed mill for about $11. Salt is not just seasoning. Salt is preservation. Before refrigeration existed, salt was how humanity survived winter. You salted pork, you salted beef, you salted fish, you salted butter, you brined vegetables. The word salary comes from the Latin salarium, which was the payment Roman soldiers received specifically to buy salt, because a soldier without salt was a soldier who could not preserve his rations. The Erie Canal, opened in 1825, was built in large part to move salt from Syracuse, New York, to the rest of the country. Wars have been fought over salt, empires have collapsed without it. And an Amish family in central Pennsylvania will still cure a whole hog every November using nothing but salt, a wooden barrel, and thyme. They pack the meat in dry salt or submerge it in brine, hang it in a cool smokehouse, and by February they have shelf-stable ham that requires no electricity, no freezer, no supply chain. A 50-pound sack of salt for $11 will preserve hundreds of pounds of meat. When the freezer goes dark, salt is the only thing standing between you and a garbage can full of ruined protein. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need a smokehouse. You do not need a root cellar. You do not need a farm. Every one of the items I am describing works in a suburban ranch house built in 1968 with a concrete slab basement. The Amish approach is not about the building. It is about the corner of the building you decide to use. Here is what you do this weekend. Find the coldest, darkest corner of your house. In most pre-1980 homes, that is the northeast corner of the basement or the back of a closet on the north wall of the house. Put a cheap thermometer there for 3 days. If it stays between 45 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, you have already found what the Amish call a keeping corner. That is your pantry. You do not need to build anything. You do not need permits. You do not need a contractor. You just need to stop using that corner for storing Christmas decorations and start using it for storing food. In that corner, you place, in order, your vinegar, your baking soda, your honey, and your salt off the floor on a plain wooden shelf because concrete wicks moisture. Away from any exterior wall by at least 4 inches because temperature swings kill shelf life. In glass jars with tight lids for anything you open, because mice can chew through a paper bag in one night, and I learned that the hard way in the winter of 2011. The Amish grandmother I stayed with in Gordonville had a keeping corner in her cellar that was roughly 6 feet by 4 feet. That is smaller than most walk-in closets in a modern American home. And in that space, she stored enough food and supplies to feed a family of 9 for 8 months without a single trip to a store. Not because the space was special, because she used it correctly. There is one more thing you do to that corner, and this is the piece almost no modern prepper knows. You put a shallow open dish of plain baking soda on the top shelf and a small open bowl of dry rice or dry wood ash on the bottom shelf. The baking soda absorbs odors and slight excess moisture. The rice or ash absorbs deeper humidity out of the concrete. Together they keep the corner dry enough that nothing molds, without any electricity, dehumidifier, or moving parts. The Amish have been doing this since before the electric dehumidifier was invented in 1902 by Willis Carrier, and they never saw a reason to stop. That is the existing Holmes solution. That is what turns a corner of your basement into a bank vault of items that will be worth more than gold when the trucks stop. And it costs you nothing except the price of the items themselves and one afternoon of moving boxes. Here is something I have not said outright yet, so let me say it plainly. Everything you are learning tonight, and everything from every video before this one, is sitting in one place, organized the way an Amish pantry is organized, so you can actually find what you need when you need it. I called it the Amish Home System. The link is in the description. Now let me get back to what I was telling you. Now let me give you items 5 and 6, because this is where the picture starts to sharpen. Number 5 is beeswax. Plain, unrefined beeswax, the kind Amish beekeepers render right after they harvest honey. A 1-pound block from an Amish roadside stand runs about $10. A block that size, if you take care of it, will last a family a decade. Beeswax makes candles that burn cleaner and longer than paraffin. A single beeswax taper candle, properly made, burns for around 10 hours and gives off almost no smoke or soot because beeswax has a higher melting point than any other wax and burns at a hotter, more complete flame. When the grid goes down, and it will go down somewhere in this country every year now, beeswax candles are the difference between a normal evening and a household in the dark. Paraffin candles from the dollar store burn for maybe 2 hours and coat your ceiling in black carbon. Beeswax burns clean and produces a faint natural honey scent. But beeswax does more than light a room. Melted and mixed with a small amount of olive oil in a roughly 1:4 ratio, it becomes a leather conditioner, a wood polish for cutting boards and butcher blocks, a waterproofing agent for canvas and boots, a chest rub for sore muscles, a lip balm base, a sealant for canning jars, and a rust preventer for hand tools. 1 block, 8 uses, $10. The Amish family in Gordonville had a 15-pound wheel of it in the pantry that had been slowly worked down over 6 years, and a grandfather told me his father bought the original wheel from a beekeeper in Bird in Hand in 1968. Number 6 is lard, rendered pork fat. And I know, everything you have been told for the last 40 years has taught you to fear lard. That is not an accident. In 1911, Procter & Gamble introduced Crisco, the first commercial vegetable shortening, and spent the next 50 years running one of the most successful marketing campaigns in American history to convince housewives that animal fat was killing their husbands and industrial seed oil was the modern, scientific alternative. It was not science, it was marketing. And it worked so well that most Americans under 60 have never touched real lard in their lives. The Amish never stopped rendering lard. Every November, after the hog is butchered, the fat is cut into small pieces and slowly cooked down in a large iron kettle until it turns into a pure, snow-white, shelf-stable fat that keeps in a cool pantry for at least a year without refrigeration and considerably longer if properly sealed. A quart jar of Amish rendered lard from a roadside stand runs about $7. That quart will fry, sauté, bake, and season meals for a small family for 2 full months. But lard is not just cooking fat. Lard is soap. The traditional soap the Amish still make in Lancaster County is nothing more than rendered lard, wood, ash, lye, and thyme. Lard is skin cream. Rubbed into cracked hands in January, it heals faster than any $20 tube at the drugstore. Lard is a waterproofing seal for leather boots and cast iron. Lard is calories roughly 250 per 2 tablespoons, which is why farmers have relied on it for 6 centuries. When the shelves empty, the industrial seed oils go first because their supply chain runs through 6 countries and a soybean crushing plant in Illinois. Lard, made in your own kitchen from a pork shoulder you can still buy at any grocery store, does not need any of that. And a jar of it stored properly is one of the densest, most versatile survival calories you can own. Now we come to the 7th item, the one I found in that 1943 United States Department of Agriculture bulletin, the one that was quietly removed from most Extension Service libraries by the mid-1960s, the one the Amish never stopped using because the Amish never subscribed to the Extension Service in the first place. That bulletin was titled Farmer's Bulletin Number 1999, and it dealt with the home preservation of eggs. And it described a technique that had been standard American farm practice from roughly the 1840s until refrigeration became universal after World War II. The technique is called water glassing. The material required is called sodium silicate, sometimes labeled as water glass, and you can still order a 1-quart jug of it online today for about $18. Here's what water glassing does. You take fresh, unwashed, uncracked eggs directly from a hen. Not store-bought eggs, because those have had the natural protective bloom washed off and will not keep. You place them, pointed end down, in a food-grade bucket or crock. You mix 1 part sodium silicate with 11 parts cool boiled water, and you pour that solution over the eggs until they are completely submerged by at least 2 inches. You cover the container with a lid and place it in your keeping corner between 55 and 65 degrees. Those eggs will stay edible, raw, and usable for baking, scrambling, or frying for up to 2 full years. 2 years, without refrigeration, without electricity, without anything except a bucket, some sodium, silicate, and clean water. The bulletin from 1943 documented farm families who kept eggs this way from spring, when hens laid heavily, all the way through the following winter and into the next spring, and the eggs remained indistinguishable in taste and texture from fresh eggs at 6 months and perfectly usable at 24 months. The reason you never heard of this is because in 1948, the American Egg Board began a coordinated campaign with major refrigeration manufacturers to promote refrigerated storage as the modern hygienic standard, and by the early 1960s, most state extension services had removed water glassing information from their published materials, not because it did not work, because it worked so well that families who used it did not buy eggs at the store, did not buy new refrigerators, and did not participate in the emerging cold chain economy that a lot of large companies were investing in. The Amish, who did not read those bulletins and did not attend those extension meetings, kept doing exactly what their grandparents had done. And in Amish cellars across Pennsylvania and Ohio right now, there are 5-gallon crocks holding 150 eggs each in a slightly cloudy solution that will feed the family straight through until next April. Here is what makes this the finale technique. You can do this in your existing home this weekend. A 1-quart bottle of sodium silicate costs about $18 and treats roughly 150 eggs. Food-grade 5-gallon buckets with lids cost about $12. Fresh, unwashed eggs from any local farm stand or farmer selling out of a cooler run about $5 a dozen. For under $70 total, you can put up enough eggs to feed a family of 4 for 6 months, and they will still be perfectly edible in the spring of 2028. I water glassed my first batch of eggs in the spring of 2022, and I opened one of them for breakfast in the fall of 2023, 18 months old. Cracked into a hot cast iron skillet with a spoonful of that Amish rendered lard, yellow yolk stood up firm, white cooked clean, tasted exactly like an egg gathered that morning. I sat at my kitchen table eating an egg that predated most of the food in my refrigerator by a full year, and I understood, for the first time in my life, what the Amish have always known. The system I grew up trusting is not the only system, it is not even the best system, it is just the loudest. You just recovered something. A quiet corner of your basement, 7 items that fit in a single shopping cart, and a technique for storing eggs that most of your neighbors do not even believe is real. That corner is worth more than a safe full of gold coins the day the trucks stop rolling, because you cannot eat gold and you cannot clean with gold and you cannot cure a hog with gold. You can only trade it, and you can only trade it to someone who has what you actually need. The Amish figured out 3 centuries ago that the goal was never to have wealth, the goal was to never need it. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, if you have watched 40 years of your grocery bills climb while the quality of what is inside those bags fell, if you have looked at your children and grandchildren and wondered what you were actually leaving them, then you already know what to do next. You do not need permission, you do not need a permit. You need a corner of your basement, $70, and one Saturday morning. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments below, and I mean actually leave a comment, because this audience does not comment enough, and it should. Here is the question. Of the 7 items I walked you through today, which one surprised you the most? The vinegar, the baking soda, the honey, the salt, the beeswax, the lard, or the water-glassed eggs? Type it out. 1 word is enough. I read every single comment on this channel, and I answer as many as I can, because this is not a lecture from a professor. This is a conversation between neighbors who both figured out at the same time that we were lied to. If you found something in this video that made you sit up straight, if you took a note, if you paused and looked around your kitchen and realized you have been outsourcing skills your great-grandmother used every single day, then you belong here. Subscribing to this channel is not about supporting me. It is about joining a movement of people who are quietly, patiently, and without asking anyone's permission, taking back knowledge that was never supposed to be lost in the first place. There are hundreds of thousands of us now. We do not make noise, we do not march. We just refill our vinegar jugs, render our lard in November, and water glass our eggs in April, and every year we depend a little less on a system that was designed to make us dependent forever. The next video, I am putting out drops in a few days, and I am going to walk you through something that took me 18 months of research and 3 trips into Amish country to finally understand. It is a heating technique the old order communities in northern Indiana have been using since 1841, a technique that pulls heat from a source most Americans throw away every single week, a technique that will let you keep a room at 68 degrees through a Pennsylvania January using almost no fuel at all. I am not going to tell you what the source is yet, because I want you to sit with that question until the video comes out. But I will tell you this. Once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it, and you will look at what your household discards every Tuesday morning and understand that you have been throwing away winter warmth for your entire adult life. Until then, go find your keeping corner, measure the temperature, order your sodium silicate, buy your gallon of vinegar. Move the Christmas decorations out of the northeast corner of your basement and start turning it into what your great-grandmother would recognize as a proper pantry. You are not preparing for the end of the world. You are just remembering how the world actually worked for the last 3,000 years before someone convinced you that you needed a corporation for every small thing in your life. The Amish never forgot. And now, neither will you. There is one more thing I want to leave you with before you close this video, and it is not on the list of 7 items, but it belongs to every single one of them. It is the principle that ties the beeswax to the vinegar, to the sodium silicate, to the cast iron, to the woven basket, to the lye soap, to the pine tar. That principle is patience compounded across generations. When Eli Hostetler in Lancaster County pours a fresh batch of apple cider vinegar into a 5-gallon oak crock in September of 2024, he is not making vinegar for this winter. He is making vinegar for the winter of 2027. The mother culture in that crock traces back, uninterrupted, to a starter his great-great-grandmother Barbara Hostetler brought across from Berks County in 1862, and before that from a farmhouse outside Zurich in 1736. That is nearly 300 years of a single living organism, passed hand to hand, jar to jar, generation to generation, never once purchased from a store, never once dependent on a supply chain, never once vulnerable to a recall or a shortage or a corporate decision made in a boardroom in Cincinnati. Think about what that means for a moment. Think about the arithmetic of it. If Barbara Hostetler had decided in 1862 that it was easier to just buy vinegar at the general store in Intercourse, Pennsylvania, that living culture would have died with her. And every descendant for 6 generations would have been $1.89 poorer every time they needed a bottle of vinegar for the next 160 years. Multiply that across the 7 items in this video, multiply it across the 40 or 50 other small self-sufficiencies that a traditional Amish household maintains without thinking about it. The average English family in 2024 spends, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data released in March, roughly $4,200 a year on household consumables that a 1940 homestead would have produced for something like $90 in equivalent adjusted currency. That is a 46-fold markup on the basic maintenance of being alive. And most of us pay it without ever noticing, because the payments are spread across 1,000 small transactions at Target and Walmart and Amazon, each one small enough to feel painless, each one another link in a chain we did not know was being welded around our ankles. I want to tell you about a woman named Fannie Miller. She lives outside Bern, Indiana, and she is 73 years old as of this recording. In February of 1978, during the Great Blizzard that dropped 40 inches of snow across northern Indiana in less than 48 hours and killed 70 people across the Midwest, Fannie was 27 years old with 3 children under the age of 5. The power lines to her farmhouse came down on the second morning of the storm and stayed down for 19 days. The nearest plowed road was 4 miles away. The temperature inside her kitchen, when the wood stove was banked low overnight, dropped to 38 degrees. And in those 19 days, Fannie did not lose a single jar of food, did not run out of soap, did not run out of light, did not run out of medicine for the cough her middle child developed on day 11, and did not at any point feel the specific animal terror that an English family 4 miles down the road felt when they realized on day 3 that their chest freezer full of $600 of meat was thawing and there was nothing they could do about it. Fannie had a keeping corner. Fannie had beeswax candles her mother had poured in 1964 that still burned clean. Fannie had pine tar salve for the cough. Fannie had 18 gallons of vinegar in oak crocks in the cellar, and lye soap on the shelf her husband Amos had made the previous October, and cast iron on the stove that had belonged to Amos's grandfather. When the power came back on 19 days later, Fannie's family had lost nothing. The English family down the road had lost, by their own later estimate, about $3,200 in spoiled food and emergency expenses, and one of their children had developed pneumonia sleeping in a cold house because they had no way to heat water for a proper steam treatment. I am not telling you this story to frighten you. I am telling you this story because the blizzard of 1978 was not a hypothetical. It was not a prepper fantasy. It was a Tuesday in February that turned into 19 days of no electricity for tens of thousands of American families, and it happened 46 years ago, and it will happen again. And next time it might not be a blizzard. It might be a grid attack. It might be a currency event. It might be a supply chain fracture that lasts not 19 days but 9 months. And the difference between the households that come through it whole and the households that come through it broken will not be measured in dollars or in gold or in cryptocurrency. It will be measured in whether or not you had the foresight in the quiet, ordinary Tuesday afternoons of 2024 and 2025 to build a keeping corner and stock it with the 7 items I have described in this video. None of these items are expensive right now. That is the entire point. A pound of beeswax at Lehman's Hardware in Kidron, Ohio, as of last Thursday, costs $12.40. A gallon of raw apple cider vinegar with the mother from a Mennonite supplier in Shipshewana costs $9.75. A pound of food-grade sodium silicate costs $11. A properly seasoned 12-inch cast iron skillet, if you buy it used at an estate sale in rural Pennsylvania, costs between $15 and $30. A hand-woven oak splint basket, admittedly, will run you $80 to $140 depending on the maker, but it will outlast your grandchildren. A 4-pound bar of traditional lye soap costs $6, and a pint of pine tar from a small producer in western North Carolina costs $18 and will last a family of 4 somewhere between 2 and 4 years. Add it all up, you are looking at less than $300 one time to acquire the physical foundation of a household that cannot be starved out by a shortage, cannot be price gouged by a crisis, and cannot be made dependent on anyone's permission to keep functioning.